till you actually. Okay. I am so happy to introduce our first speaker from Nigeria, Valentine. He works as an enterprise engineering product cluster lead in a financial technology company in Nigeria called Global Accelerex. I hope I said that right. He's a front-end enthusiast and an Angular architect. He is a lead host and founder of the Angular Africa channel on Angular Nation. He's passionate about technology. He's a husband of one, and he likes to sing to himself. So take it away, Valentine.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
I hope you can hear me clearly. That's good. Thank you for that wonderful introduction.
We are
So,
getting a
guys,
I think, hold
like
on a
Julie
sec,
said,
Valentine.
my
I
name
think
is
we're getting a little
Valentine
stuttering.
Awe, and today I'll be taking you through some magical stuff. Okay, is it better? Is it better? Can you hear me clearly?
Yes, it is better. Thank you.
Okay, great. Great. Okay. Let me just pull up my slide, then get started. Can you see my screen?
It says it started screen sharing. I just see a black screen. There we go.
Okay.
Now I see it.
Nice.
Okay, great. If at any point you don't hear me clearly, just signal and then I will, probably repeat. So today I'll be taking you through some magical stuff, or what I call the magical stuff, magical directives. And they are ng template outlet, the ng container, ng template, and the ng content. But before I, go into the main details of these magical directives, I'd like to briefly introduce myself. I know that has already been done, but that is me over there with my, traditional attire. I'm Valentine Awe, and I am an enterprise engineering product cluster lead at a fintech company here in Nigeria called Global Accelerex. I'm a Nigerian. I'm also the Angular Africa lead host at Angular Nation, and an Angular architect. So if you want to check me out on Twitter, that is my handle. So guys, the first magical directive we'll be looking at today is the ng template. The ng template is the most common of the magical directives that we're talking about today. And even if you haven't used ng template before, by default, Angular, whenever we use the structural directives include the ng-if, the ng-for, then the ng-switch. So whenever you use these structural directives in your code, in any element like a div or whatever, like a list, Angular automatically uses the ng template under the hood, and we will see what Angular does whenever it sees an any of the structural directive. So what is the ng template? The ng template is basically a representation of an Angular template. So this is it. If you can still see my slide, you will notice that we have a div, which is the host element, which has an ng-if, which is the structural directives that says if no food. Yes. So whenever Angular sees something like this with the structural directives, you can see below what it does to it. It creates an ng template and then wraps the host element inside of the ng template. So at any point in time, whenever you write a code with the structural directives under the hood, this is what happens. So Angular uses ng template, but I mean, we're not Angular, but we too can also use ng template. So this is what happens whenever Angular wraps the host element inside an ng template. Because there's an extra element, like we saw in the previous slide, which is this, you might think that, oh, there could be another layer or another element being added to the DOM tree. But no, what Angular does is that it takes that ng template and comments it out. So if you inspect your web page, you're going to notice this in your DOM tree, that this commented green text you see here is the ng template which Angular wraps your host element. So everything is still normal. You can still see the host element here, and it still works fine. And now, sometimes we might want to play Angular. So because Val said, oh yeah, Angular does this under the hood, and you might want to do the same thing in your code. And because we say that Angular does not display the ng template, that means that if we try to become Angular and decide to write ng template in our code, maybe we want to write a condition like what we have here, ng template, ng if not food, and we try to do this in our code. Because we said that Angular does not display ng template in the DOM, what happens is that it's going to pick this host element, which is the ng template, wraps it inside another ng template, because that's what Angular does when it sees ng templates, when it sees structural directives. So this is what it's going to look like in our DOM. So you never get anything displayed out when you try to, put a structural directive inside of an ng template. Well, that's okay. But if you still intend to use an ng template with a structured directive, all you have to do is to wrap it inside an ng if like we have like this with the brackets, and that could work fine. But I mean, there's really no need in doing that. So let's look at why and when we can use ng templates in our code. First of all, there's the ng if give us some ways to do some conditional statements. So we have the ng if else, we have the ng then else. So first of all, if you can still see my screen, you'll see there's an ng if no food, else make food. What? And then below it, we have a template. We have a template which has a reference of make food. There's a template reference. And then we have some elements inside, which is a div and frying some eggs. What happens is that if Angular sees this, it's going to look for the value of food. If food does not exist, it's going to say, oh yeah, I have a template here, which is make food. So Angular is going to pick this template, and then what you're going to see on your screen will be, I am frying some eggs. So you can have templates and you want to display the template based on a condition. So instead of doing maybe NGE for a template, NG for another template, you can just do something like this with the if else. Now the second use case is the if then else. So what this means is that you show the cook template. If there's food, then you show the stay hungry template. So that's what we have here. We have a template. I am cooking something nice. I'm cooking something nice. Yeah. So, but they have different references, which is stay hungry and cook. So whenever Angular sees this, it's going to look at the templates that you've used, and it's going to pick the template and fix them inside of this host element, which is the div here. Isn't that cool, guys?
Very cool.
Great. So that is the ng template for you. So it's simply it's simply a representative of of your template. So it's just a wrapper that wraps your template, and by default, it doesn't get displayed on your screen except you invoke it like this. You use your ng if, and there are many other ways you can invoke your templates. We'll be looking at that when we get to other magical directives. Yes. So now, if you can see my screen very well, there's a very interesting error here which says can't have multiple template bindings on one element. And I'm pretty sure that you are familiar with this. If anyone has never encountered this error before, I would like you to, speak up or raise your hands. Okay, so I will assume we've all seen this before. And if you read it very well, it says that there you have multiple template bindings to one element. So that means you try to do like an ng-for and an ng-if inside one element, and or using two structural directives in one single element. Angular is going to frown at that, and it's going to give you this exact same error. I mean, when I was learning Angular, this is what I basically do always. And each time I get this error, the simple solution that I do is to, you know, tell Angular, oh, I'm a smart guy, so I'm just going to get another div or get another element and then pull the ng for so I can separate my structural directives in order not to get this error. And it works fine. It's the smartest solution, or it was the smartest solution as at then. But then if you take a second look at the solution and you decide to look at your DOM, this is what you're going to see. You're going to see that this first div that is holding the ng for structural directive is actually of no use to us. What it does is just helping us loop through the array of names. And that means we have a redundant div that we've just added to our code. That's an extra div that we don't need in our code. And one major issue with this, if you're writing a small app, it could be okay. If you're writing a big app and you have to iterate through a lot of things, it's cool, it's not so clean. And the major reason why it's not so cool again is because when you want to style this div, you see yourself or you find yourself styling or nesting your CSS, trying to access the actual target div, which is what actually displays the name. So that is where ng container comes into play. The ng container is a grouping element that does not interfere with the layout and style of your application. It helps to remove redundant elements and also removes invalid HTML standards. So first of all, if you look at this sample code here, it's similar to what we had before, but the only difference is that we've replaced the div with the ng container, and then we passed in the structural directive, which is the ng for structural directive. Now, look at what we have as in our DOM. If you do the inspection, you will notice that we only have the divs that is holding the values that we are iterating through. So we have a single div val, we have a single div oni, and then we have a single div dagger. So you see all this is cleaner. And if you have to style this element, it will be easier for you to style without having to, you know, do some nesting in your CSS. So basically, that's one of the superpowers of ng container. There are many more to come. Another thing the ng container does for us is that it helps to remove redundant elements, which we have just seen. And then it also helps to eliminate invalid HTML standards. So there's this common thing that people do. In a typical example is when they are writing a list of items, and then they want to bring in a structured directive like an ng-if, if there's a condition that you need to check for before you display a particular list. And the quickest solution to do that is by using a span or maybe a paragraph or any inline element that comes to the mind. But that is actually an invalid HTML standard. But you might never notice because the browser is our friend and it will try to always, ignore this type of errors or try to auto fix them for us. But it's actually invalid. So when you find yourself in that type of situation where you want to chip in, some structural directives within elements, the ng container can also come into play to help to ensure that because it doesn't affect the layout of your application, to just get commented out like you can see here. So that's another major superpower of the ng container. I hope that's clear. So we move to the ng content. ng content is another magical directives that I'm sure that we've pretty used in our application, and it's quite powerful, and it is the brain behind what we call content projection. I'm pretty sure that we have used different component libraries in our Angular applications, whether as a beginner or as an intermediate or an expert in Angular, the ng content helps in projecting content. And what that means is that if you have like a reusable component that you've designed, and then you don't know the type of data that might be coming into that component, you can use the ng content to say, oh, whenever you want to use this component, you're just going to pass in this specific data with the specific selectors inside of me, and then I'm just going to project it for you. So that is the whole concept of content projection. So let's get on to see how we actually use the content projection. Yes. So in content projection, we have different types of content projection. We have the single content projection, which is this. We have the multiple, and then we also have the, I'm not so sure of the name, but we'll check it out. So this is the single multiple content projection. If you look at this very well, we have a component, which is called app.banner.ts. App.banner.ts has a style, a background color of gray, a color of green. But this app banner does not have any data inside of it. So because this banner will or might be reusable across all other pages in our applications, and you don't want to create multiple banners or multiple components for each use case of a banner, you can then create a single shared banner, which is this app banner.ts, and then put in the ng content inside of the banner, right? And what happens is that whenever, if you check this second code sample, you will notice that we are using the app banner here. You can see the selector app banner, and then we are passing a value inside of the app banner. So what this means is that wherever we use this app banner, we can pass in anything of interest to it. And the banner will have the background color of gray and also the color of green, but with a different content. So the ng content can help us create reusable components that allow us to inject dynamic values, and it gets displayed with defined style from the parent component, which is reusable. So that is for the single content projection. Now, what if I want to design a banner like this or like a model like this? By the way, this is the Nigerian flag. I hope you guys like it. So what if you want to design a banner like this, and then in the banner, you want to have a header of the beginning of greatness. You want to have a body with a separate content, and then you want to have a footer with also a separate content. Now, remember in our previous example, we only had just single content projection, and then now, if we try to do the same thing, maybe we try to pass in a header, a footer, and a body here, Angular is really going to get confused because Angular wouldn't know the exact space it is supposed to put, this text here, or we're supposed to put the content of the value, or where it's supposed to put the footer. But then the ng content comes to our rescue again. It gives us what we call the select attribute. What the select attribute does is that it helps us to provide us with capabilities of specifying CSS selectors that will represent the content that we will be projecting into it. So in order to create something like this using the ng content, we have this code sample. So this is a representative, this is a code sample that represents what the Nigerian flag that I just showed you. So if you notice, we have 3 ng content specified here. First of all, we have the ng content here. Secondly, we have the ng content, and then the third ng content here. And then what I said earlier, we have the select attribute, which allows us to specify CSS selectors. If you can see my screen, you see that we've specified a head, we've specified a body, and we've specified a footer. And what this means is that whenever we want to pass in contents to this our reusable modal at any point in time, the modal will watch out, or the component will watch out for the class of head, watch out for the class of body, and watch out for the class of foot. And when it sees that, it ingests it into the corresponding holders here. So an example is this. So now we want to reuse our app customer, like I called it. So what we just need to do is to write a class. We call it head. Write a class, we call it body, and then we write a class, we call it foot. So automatically, if we decide to change the arrangement, or we decide to move head to foot and foot to head, Angular we automatically know that I'm supposed to search for a class of head and fix it here. So whatever arrangement we have, wherever we would decide to fix our template that's using our reusable component, it doesn't really matter because ng content is smart enough to help us fix that issue and then that alignment. So that is the second aspect, which is the multiple content projection. Now that is fine, but what if it gets to a point that I don't have a footer to present to ng content? I don't have a footer, I don't have any definition for a footer. What is going to happen is that ng content will not present anything in this footer, so that place is going to be blank. And that means if our users or our visitors sees our web applications, it's not going to be so beautiful or nice as it ought to be, because we're going to have a content that is missing. And that's what will now lead us to the last magical directive, which I call the ng template outlet. The ng template outlet will help us to solve that issue of not having default values, because for the ng template, for the ng content, you must have values at all points in time for each of the selects that has been specified. So now this is the ng template outlet. It's very useful for creating highly configured components, and you can also use it to insert common templates on different section of a view. So here's a sample code of setting default values for your contents that you want to project. So if you look at this code sample, we created a template. If you notice, we are using this magical directive, excuse me, we're using this magical directive, the ng template. And then we have a second template, which is default body. We have the default and then default body. Remember what we said, that the ng template is just a simple holder or representative, whatever you want to call it, of your HTML, of your template. So we have a lot of HTML here, which is I am the lost body, I'm the lost head, and all that. And then this ng template is just helping us hold them. There's no way they will be displayed on the screen. And now, what do we want to use them for? So here we are writing, we are trying to create a reusable component that we are expecting a user, right, to pass in templates to us. So if I have like what we had with the modal, then I'm expecting a user to pass in values to the modal, like we have with the app customer. This time around, we are expecting the user to pass in the template. Now we are not using the ng content, we are using the ng template outlet to display that template that will be passed to us. So in this our reusable component, we have in our component.txt file, we are expecting an input value of header, which is a type of template ref. And we're also expecting an input value of body, which is also a template ref. So now, if you look at our parent div here, we have the ng container. Again, here, there was no need to put a div because it would be redundant. So we are using the ng container here at this point. Now we are saying that if our component sees a header, that's if the header value is provided, let the header that was provided be displayed as our header. But else, if there's no header provided, then we are going to use our default head here, which is a template. So at any point in time, if you don't specify the contents that you want to project to your reusable component, you always have default values that you can reuse. So if you don't provide the header and the body at any point in time, maybe you just use the tag of this component, it will automatically display I am the lost head as the header, I am the lost body as the body. We're going to see what it looks like in the live coding session. So, and lastly, we have reusing your templates across a page of your application. Say one good use case for this is if you have like maybe like a banner or like a logo that you display in multiple pages of your application, in a single page of your application, multiple instances or places in your application. A typical example, if you look at this ng template, is holding a message that says, I love to be happy, I love happy people. And now if by any chance we have this, defined or placed in different aspects of our web page, it will be nice, despite this is simple, it would be nice to have us writing this over and over again. Maybe there was a div, an image tag, a paragraph, or a span together bundled up. You see, you have to replicate those stuffs in the multiple sessions where you want to display them. But with the ng template outlet, you can just create that simple template that you want to reuse across that page, and then use the ng template outlet to reference it. So you see here, we just have to specify the ng template, and automatically whatever content we have here will be displayed there. So basically that is all the theoretical aspect of our magical directives. And I'll just hold on for questions before I, jump to the code and show you, how it really works.
Do we have any questions?
And if you do have a question, you can either type it out in the chat and then we can read it for you, or you're also welcome to unmute and ask it directly.
Or we can go on to the live coding.
Yeah, this has been like super clear. So I don't think I think it's I don't think the fact there aren't questions so far is a bad thing. So we can move on. But if you have another question or you think of one, feel free to add it to the chat and we can do it after. You can ask Valentine. Yeah, at the end.
Okay, great. Thank you. So I hope you can still see my screen.
We did, and then it just disappeared.
Okay,
now I see me.
Sorry. Okay.
There we go.
I run now.
Yep.
Okay, great. So first of all, we're going to be looking at the ng content and the sample code where we use our ng content. So this is a simple modal. And if you see here, there's actually no content that's been, that you can read and make sense, to a reader or a programmer. But if you notice that we've defined, oh, I was trying to, okay. If you notice we've defined the ng content here, we have the ng content here, and then we have the ng content here as well. And then we use the select attribute I spoke about to be, to help us specify the reference to whatever content that we will be projecting. In the slide that I showed to you, I only use div, but here I'm trying to I try to show you that you can use different selectors. Here we're using the ID. Here we're just using the plain element, which is a p tag, and here we are using a class. So whatever selector you want to use, you can even pass in an attribute directly here, and then automatically it will get projected. So now how do we use this modal? So if you go to app, this is where we use this modal, which is the app modal here. So automatically we've specified the head. So whenever Angular sees this, whenever this magical component sees this, it's just going to pick it and insert it here. Whenever I see the p tag, it knows exactly where to insert it. And then whenever I see the foot class, it knows where exactly to insert it. So let's just see what that looks like, and then make some changes to see it. So this is the modal. You have the salary native. This is confirmation of your payment. Click to print receipt. So let's try to change this guy's position. Let's say we're moving the div, we're putting it here. And let's see what that looks like. If you notice, nothing changed. The header remains the same, the body remains the same, the footer remains the same. And then if we decide to say, oh, maybe I was using that reusable component, I'm your team, and then I decide to reuse the component, and I forgot that I'm supposed to use a class, and then I decide to use an ID. What happens is that I'm going to actually get confused. So because there is no ID, there's no class specified for this, it isn't going to display it. So that's going to, be empty. So you have to always check that manually to ensure that you specify the appropriate ID or whatever selector that you have used. Yes. So that's it for the ng content. So this is how to reuse a component. This is how to create a component that you want to reuse across your application. It could be a generic modal for approval, to delete, to approve, to anything at all that you want to reuse. And then you can always project your content. You can use this in multiple other pages of your application, and then you project your content like this. So that's it with the ng content. Now the ng template outlet. One very major interest with the ng template outlet, like I stated before, it gives us the ability to specify default content, default template. So let's look at what we have. So here we have a container. Remember what we said, our ng container. And then we have the ng template outlet. And then we have a template of books templates. And then we say if it's present, they use it. If it's not, we have default books. And now let's see what our TX file looks like, our component file looks like. So if you check it out, we are saying, hey, we are expecting a books template, which is a type of reference, of course. So now we have that here, and we're saying if that is not provided, we are going to use the default books. And you can see that we have a default books that is being created. So at every point in time, whenever we use this books view component, if we do not specify the input value which we're expecting, by default it's going to pick this default books and then project it in our container. So let's see what that looks like. Yes, so books, good. So yeah, we have our app books. Okay, yeah, so we have our books that we are using here. Let me confirm that. Our books company the same. We have the app books that we're using, but if you notice something, we are not passing any value to it at all. There's no value that's been passed to it, but yet we're having data being displayed. And where is the data coming from? We're not passing in any data, we're not passing in any value, but here we have the value displayed here, and with a nice looking cards. That's because we have default values that we have specified that if that does not exist, if that does not exist, it's going to use this, and that's what it's currently using. Now let's try to specify a template for it. So we're going to pass in the template to this. Let's say there's the book view, pages, and books view. So this is our books component.html, and then these are books view. Okay, we have the books page, and then we have the books view. So the books view was where we defined the the old template and then the default value, and the books component is where we now use our our view of our books. Now notice here that we have created template. We've created a sample template table view, and then we've created another template card view. So what we're trying to do is to say we have two types of view for our data. One can be a card, and one can be a table. And this can be very useful in cases whereby maybe you want to use different view for, say, like if it's a desktop app, you want to use a card view or a table view. And if it's a small app like a mobile view, if someone, try to reduce the size of the screen, you get to display the card view. So we've created two templates for these, and then we are calling the app view. We are calling the app view that we have created, and then we are passing a template this time around to it. Okay, I guess I was showing the wrong code earlier. So when we remove this template, these are app view, app books.view, and then we have this nice looking cards that are showing here. But if we decide to pass in, data, let's say, what is this expecting? App view. Then we have book lists. So you can see that we've passed our own data to it, and then it's displaying the data that we have passed to it. And remember, when we did pass any data, it's used its own data. Now, what if we do not want to use the default template? Well, if we have defined our own template that we want, what's it called? We want our app view to use. So we can come here and just specify the, what's the code? Books view is expecting books template. So let's say we're giving it a books template of, we just specify the template of table view. Let's say we're giving it a table view. So this time I'm passing in table view. So while I am manually doing this, you can have like an automatic way of doing it. You can create like an host listener for, say, when you want to change the different view for your data. So we have books template, and then we pass in a table view. You can, automatically change this to card view. Depends on your own logic. So now that we have the table view, automatically that same data that I see here will be displayed in a table manner. So with the NG template outlet, we can automatically, switch between the type of views that I want to display and also specify default view. And lastly, there's another interesting thing with the data, right? If you notice, at some point, we didn't pass in any data. So let's take the data out. We didn't pass in any data, but yet we had value. And this is different from the data that we passed from the parents component that was using that view. And now, how did we do that? So the ng template outlet also provides us with a very interesting tool, which we call the contest. This is the short form of writing the contest. And what the contest does is that it gives us the ability to specify an implicit value for our data. So if you take a note, you will see that we have let books defined here for our default template. And what that simply means is that we want this value, these books, to be only available in the scope of this ng template. By default, when you have your ng template, it can also have access to everything you have in your component file. But this time around, you can restrict the value of the ng templates to ng templates alone. And that is what we have here. And what Angular does is that whenever it sees these books, whenever it sees the syntax, this syntax with let, it could be anything that you call it, let yogurt, let pizza, or whatever you want to call it, depending on your use case. And whenever it sees this let, it goes to the context and then attaches implicit value that you have defined to the books. So that allows us to iterate through the books without even knowing what the value really is, whether it's going to be cards, data, whatever it is. But because you have used these books here, we've defined it or we've declared it, it automatically assign the data from the implicit value to our books. And that is also the same thing for our default templates that we define in the component, the parents component. So we just did the same thing. We could call it anything, like I said before. And whenever this gets injected into the app view, to the books view, it will assign the implicit value of the data to it, and then it trades through it all over again. So with that, I've come to the end of this presentation. I hope you enjoyed the talk, and I'm hoping for questions. Thank you for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Valentine. That was awesome.
That was a really great talk, and also an impressive live demo.
Yeah.
So it looks like we do have one question from Art. So he said, without this approach, I would have created a component in Angular and included that selector in the HTML. Do you find that there is an advantage to using ng content over employing an Angular component?
Yes, that's a good question. So when you create a single component, that is fine. But imagine you have the same component that have the same style, like I gave an example with the modal. And then in various aspects of your application, you're going to have a modal that says, hello, welcome to my page. And then in another page, you're going to have the same, type of modal that says, hey, my name is Val. And then you have another reusable use case again for that modal. Now, if you want to use that component that you have created, you will have to find a way to be passing value to that component over and over again. So, I mean, you can use the input value. You can use input value to pass your data to it. But when you want to pass in things like a template, its own tight templates inside that model that you want to use, you will have to create multiple components for each of the use cases. But with the ng content or the ng template outlet, you only have to create that component once and then use it across all your application.
Thanks, Valentine. So ultimately, it's flexibility, I think, is what you just said, right?
Yes, reusability, exactly. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Welcome. Any more questions?
Yeah.